Hi folks, this is Eric Bourne with Harrisburg Area Community College. Going to be helping you out today with the MLA citation format. This is a big topic. I expect to be learning a lot about this over your time at writing in college. It's a big one. There's lots of details, lots of little steps along the way. Expect this to be a learning process as you go through. Today we're going to be looking at the overall steps. What's common in writing works cited entries, no matter what your sources are. This will give you a good big picture that you can apply to the sources that you want to use in your essays. Expect things to be a little bit different every time you sit down to write an entry. Your sources can lead you to pretty distinct types of entries. Let's start with a general description of what this page is and what you're going to be writing in it. First off, you need to be thinking about works cited entries as both a list and a reference. Works cited pages are a list in that they tell your reader every source you quote from in your essay. Every place, every article, every book, every website you went to find information to quote, summarize, paraphrase, you need to have an entry for all of those sources on your works cited page. They're also a reference in that each item on the list is pretty complicated. They provide your reader enough information to locate your sources. And oftentimes you're going to need more information in this regard than you would expect. Let's first tackle this topic by thinking of it in terms of minimum requirements. What do you absolutely have to do to avoid plagiarism problems? What's the bare minimum that you can build on as you get better with this? Now, first off, if you quote, paraphrase, summarize anything from anybody, you need to have a works cited entry about this source on your works cited page. If you're bringing in information from somewhere, you gotta have this entry. Now, if you can't figure out what information to put in your entry, you need to write down any information that might help your reader find the source. You've got to have the entry, and you can't let your difficulties writing it prevent you from putting something down. So help your reader out with something. If you're looking at a website, put in a URL. Write down an author's name, write down a title, whatever looks useful, get something in there. If you can give yourself enough information for you to go back and find it again, then you can write down enough information for your reader to hopefully do likewise. Now, this advice isn't going to help you get full points for your citation grade. It'll help you get any points. So let this be a starting point, but not the finishing point. On to the general process then. What are the steps that we follow when we write a works cited entry? Well, first thing that we got to do is we need to find an example entry which matches your source. There are just so many different kinds of sources out there that MLA has specified a different type of format for each one. And you got to look through the examples available and find one that tells you what to do in your particular situation. Number two, you're going to need to figure out what information is required for your entry. Looking at that example, you have to interpret it and let it tell you what you got to go out and find so that you can go find that information about your source. That's when you turn detective and start hunting around in copyright pages and so forth. Finally, you're ready to put together your works cited entry, copying the order, punctuation, and italicization of your source. Let's dive into each of these in particular. Let's start with this first one, finding an example entry. First, just take a moment to consider all the different places you might get information for an essay. You could be looking at books, dictionaries, encyclopedias, newspapers, magazines, research databases, websites, programs, movies, videos, personal interviews. There really are just a bewildering array of places you might go to find information for your essays. So with that in mind, because of this big array of places, MLA has specified an entry format for basically all these types that we mentioned and a few more that we haven't. These guides then can be initially pretty intimidating because you're going for help for your one entry and you're finding hundreds of examples for all different types of things that you haven't considered. And what's worse is that most of these guides will basically just give you an example. If you're lucky, there'll be some explanatory text, but oftentimes all you have to work with to figure out your entry is an entry that somebody else wrote for a similar but different source. So what you do with this overload of information? First, consider how they're organized. Most guides are going to organize all these many examples into 4 basic categories. They'll have a pile of example entries for books, for periodicals, for electronic sources, and they'll have a sort of catch-all for other. So your first step is figure out the category you're looking at. Now, books is pretty self-explanatory. If you have a bound book, you have something with a cover and a pile of pages between it, then look in that category. Periodicals, the slightly more confusing category. The idea is that periodicals are printed on paper publications which published at a regular interval, like a newspaper which comes out every day, a popular magazine which comes out once a month, an academic journal published twice a year. We're still in periodicals in the realm of things that are printed on paper, however. Now, this generation of students, you guys are pretty interested in things that you find on your computer, not things you find at the library. If your source is glowing at you from your computer screen, odds are you need to be looking for an example entry in the electronic sources. If none of those fits or you can't find anything in the category you initially thought, take a peek at the other category. It isn't used very often, but there's a few things in there that might be appropriate. Once you've got the category down, then peruse those examples until you find the most exact fit. Don't stop with the first thing that looks right. Keep looking until you find the thing that fits most specifically to what you're working with. Step 2. We are interpreting the example. After you find that example entry, you need to take a few minutes with it. You'll find that you need to be more exact than you realized. You'll need to distinguish between the various people involved in putting this together. Often you're looking at an author's name and an editor's name. You'll need to use those words exactly. You very commonly aren't just indicating one title, you're indicating several different titles. There'll be a host of publication information specific to medium that you'll need to indicate, and some important dates are often involved. Be ready for a pretty wide array of information here. Once you've got your list of stuff you need to find, time to go out and hunt for it. Now, there are a lot of tips and tricks that I can pass along with various specific kinds of sources. Talk to me in particular about some of these as they come up. Be prepared for one issue in particular with web sources. Since these are so popular, let me just throw a warning out there. Sometimes you're not going to be able to find all of the information that you need, all the information that you're being told you should look for. Just fair warning, know that this is going to happen. Don't let it stop you from writing your entry. You keep looking around in the format, in your guides. There are specific things to do if you ever can't find a piece of information that your entry is asking you for. At this point, you should be ready to actually write your works cited entry, but don't lose that guide yet. When you actually start to write your entry, return to that example. You're going to need to copy certain things from it. We copy the order of information as it's presented in our example. We copy the way it punctuates things, where it's using quotation marks, whether it's using periods, commas, colons between pieces of information, and pay attention to what it puts into italics. You'll need to follow that as well. Alright, so that's our overall idea for an entry. Let's work on putting together a works cited entry for a website. I have something up here for us to work with. Here we go. Let's say that you're writing a paper for an economics class and you're looking at a recent event, you're looking at a proposal to raise tip wages for certain kinds of workers. We've got this news article here. It's on the New York Times website, published January 26, 2014. Okay, let's say that in our context of our essay, we're in here quoting some information, presenting some of these specific numbers it tells us about how much employers have to pay their wait staff in certain states. Okay, fine. We want to use this in our paper. Let's talk about the works cited entry. First step is we need to find an example. We need to find an example entry. One good place that I like to recommend students to go to is Purdue University's online writing lab. They've got, it's an excellent writing resource, very commonly recommended in writing courses. You can get there through your search engine by searching for Purdue OWL online writing lab. Nice and cute. Alright, we're going to browse their website for just a moment. We see they have a research and citation link here on the side. And we need to tell it that we're looking at the MLA style. Alright. We're going to our MLA formatting and style guide. Here we go. And we're going to look along the left for their basic categories of works cited page entries. Notice they've got some overall information, books, periodicals, electronic sources, other common sources, just like I told you. So, peeking here at the electronic sources, good. I'll browse over to the left side here. There's some general information, some basic information. Now, a page on a website is a pretty common type of entry you'll write for things you find on the internet. An article in a web magazine is also a pretty good one for what we're working with, since we have a news site, got emails, listservs, a tweet. Alright. The one that seems most specific, can't use scholarly journal. New York Times is it's a good newspaper, but it's not a scholarly one as we use that term. Alright. Let's look at the example entry they have for us and interpret it. First up is a name. Now, if you see a name right at the start of the entry, you're worried about the author, the person who actually wrote the words that you want to quote. Okay, there's some kind of a title right here, 10 Tips on Writing the Living Web. Okay, now this is what we might call the title of the article. It doesn't look like an overall website name. That seems to be coming right here. Now I'm noticing right there that that is in italics. The list part, okay, that's writing for us, title of website. Good. Alright, this next bit of information is what is known as the sponsor of the website, or publisher of the website. You're looking for some kind of corporation, organization that's putting this website out for us. Then there's a date. Now you notice back in our example here, there are two dates listed. One is earlier, one is later. The way the dates work is we have the date of publication. We try to find the date when this source was actually published to the web. And the second date is going to be our date of access. In the middle here, we're going to write the medium. That's what that word web is. A one-word description of what kind of source it is we're looking at. Okay, and that's all we're going to need for this entry. Online sources have 7 pieces of information that we go out looking for. Now we're ready to play detective with this website in particular. Alright, we're back at the New York Times, and we're going to look for an author. And here he is, right at the top. We're going to do last name, comma, first name, V. Very good. Now we're looking at titles. We need a title of this particular part of the web page, and then we need the overall title for the website. So for the first title, you tend to look for big words at the top of the page that doesn't look like the logo of the overall website. I'm going to put that in quotation. Proposal to raise tip wages resisted. Alright, use my quotation marks right here, closing quotation mark after the period. Excellent. And now I'm going to put the overall title of the website. Now, kind of compare notes here. Look for something that looks like a logo at the top. Compare that briefly to the information that appears between the www and the .com. So, NY Times, the New York Times, okay. That looks like the overall title of the website. Okay. Next bit of information is the sponsor. We're looking for the sponsoring organization. Who owns the copyright on this? Who's putting this up? Now, usually for that, you want to look all the way down at the bottom of the page. You're going to be looking for a little copyright symbol. I apologize if you can't see it very well right down here. In the lower left, there's a Circle C copyright symbol. There is a year in which they have this copyrighted, and then the name of the sponsor company. So we're going to type that in right there, the New York Times Company. Good. All we need are a couple dates. We need a date of publication. We're going back up to the top. That was done on January 26th. Make sure as you write in the date that you follow MLA's format. They use a European standard actually for writing the date. We go day, month, then year. Make sure to abbreviate that month. We're going to put in our medium, which is the web. And finally, we're going to put in our day of access, which is simply today. No, 1 January, 27 January. 2014. Okay. And I'm sorry. It's supposed to be the 26th. Who's putting this video together anyway? Okay. Now, here is our works cited entry. Not quite ready to go. We're going to need to format it to fit our page. Let's get our title on the page. Let's get our page double spaced, and we need to get the indenting set up. Here's a little trick you can use to get the indenting right. And that's it for our works cited entry. There's our example, and then it's put together. That would be ready to go inside of an essay quoting from this news article in particular. Hope that was helpful for you in writing your own works cited entries. Let me know if you have questions.